So the Maimer up to this point is discussing the fact that Kabbalah and Chassidus spend a lot of real estate on the page and a lot of ink describing in great detail all kinds of levels of klipa. Why would it do that? Why would it waste its time on such negative energy? So on one level, because it's Dakel Bara Alma, the world is created through the prism of Torah, and for whatever reason, God needs these klippas in his world. So Torah has to discuss it so that it can manifest through Torah into the world. But Hagufa, the fact that it's created in this world is for that transformation. And not just to break its state of being, but to actually transform it, not just like the Basham Torah, not just Surmana, not just to leave the negative behind. That's only the beginning of the Avodah. Stage one of the Avodah is to leave behind that which is negative. But then there's the Aseh Tov, turn that very Ra into good, the transformation. And that's true of every part of the existence. And including all this very, very deep negativity. An official Shalom Aleichem. Including all this very deep negativity. And then the Shaila becomes, how do you expect you to do that? Moshe Rabbeinu himself is afraid to go to Pagai. So the Rebbe has to say, boy, come with me, I'm going with you. Because Hashem agrees that Pagai is this scary snake. So he needs Hashem's encouragement. So how is it expected every Yid to transform the negative, especially considering that we daven every day? Hashem should not bring me to an Nisayan. And here we're told that we transform even the worst of places. So the Rebbe began by explaining that all of this is done in Torah. And he explained this by introducing the Torah of the Maggid. The Maggid, which says in the same pasuk, Bayal Paran, later in the pasuk, it says, "The man shisi oisesai elav k'boy." Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to go back to Parai, even though I'm going to harden his heart, but I still need to perform more signs. That's what oisesai means, my signs. Taish the Maggid, oisesai means my words. I need my words back. So the Dvarim B'Telem, the silly chatter, the wasted chatter of Parai, those words have to be taken back and put into Torah. And that's its elevation. This is what the Maggid says. Never began this paragraph, middle page Lamed. And the paragraph which begins with we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. The line begins with the word Esa Oisius. In the middle it says Hine. So in this paragraph, they ever started saying that even the letters, as they appear to be Parai's letters, with all the klipa associated with Parai, but be'emes, it's Oisei Sai, it's my letters. And the fact that it's Oisei Sai, my letters, is revealed and is galan, restored to its proper state when it's reintegrated into Torah. So thanks to Hashem's hardening Parai's heart and Moshe Rabbeinu going down there, etc., this caused a whole bunch of extra parshas in Torah. The restoration of Hashem's words back to where they should be in Hashem's Torah, and Hashem's proper open communication, not concealed communication through klipa. It's always Oisai, it's always Hashem's letters. It's a question if it's corrupted or not corrupted. So they have to be restored to their proper state. This is where we're holding. So the Rebbe continues. Now, even though the language in the Torah of the Maggid is that what Hashem is achieving here, Moshe Rabbeinu has to achieve, is to elevate the wasted chatter, Dvarim B'Telem, of Parai, nonetheless, and therefore you can assume that that's as far as Hashem is going. As far as Hashem is expecting Moshe Rabbeinu to go is Dvarim B'Telem of Parai. And Dvarim B'Telem of Parai has to become the letters and the words of Torah. Unless a mikra, you cannot take the words of the pasuk out of their literal interpretation. And and the simple meaning of the word oisai, my signs, is not dvarim betela moisai, but it means actually the koya gemal makas and sepes. Hashem is saying, I need these three signs. I need these three more makas. Shevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzrayim, which Hashem brings upon on Mitzrayim, on Egypt. It's the worst place in the world. On part of the kingdom of Mitzrayim, who is mentioned above, the great snake that crouches in the river, Asher Amar, which said, I made the Nile, I made myself. So even though the Maggid talks about the words of Parei, to restore the words of Parei to Torah, the Pasuk talks about action that happened in the literal Pasuk talks about the Hashem signs, the actual makas that had to happen on the literal level in Mitzrayim. And through those makas was the bitter, the refinement, the final correction, the final bitter of Mitzrayim itself, on a literal level, not just on this theoretical level of the words that a par is wasting are becoming the words of Torah, but a literal level. There's literal chayshech and there's literal makis in a literal land to elevate the literal place. To the point of the bitter where Parah himself sent the Eden out. It's explained in the Maamre de B'Masnavi B'Shal Parah. But the Tzemach Tzedek and the Marash, the derech of the earlier Rabbeim, the first three generations for sure, and even the fourth generation, and in some ways this practice continued, but certainly not first generation, where my modern drushim were often the exact same drush, the exact same maamer said by each Rebbe, but each Rebbe adding hagoyis, biyudin, and points, and diukim, and so on. So you can have a maamer or go to Torah, and it's the exact same maamer in the Middle Rebbe. The Middle Rebbe is much more b'harchav, much more b'biyur, much more length. And they same exact maamer in the Tzemach Tzedek, sometimes literally word for word, like literally just a copy, many times. And then there's an added paragraph, there's an added hagah, there's an added commentary, diuk, or something. And so oftentimes you'll find the same maamer from two Rebbeim with different nuances. And here, this is the kind of maamer that we're referring to here. A maamer that's Tzemach Tzedek and a Marash, but they're both the same maamer, which comes from earlier. And which their Marash represents, and his Indian is L'chatchila River, to do things over the top, to do things full foresight without consideration for any opposition. And this year, 1983, ותשמ Gimel, is Mei Hashanah L'Klakos Shaloi. It's 100 years since his passing. So for Reish Mem Gimel. So there, the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rash explained the Parah Mishaleach. I think the correct way to pronounce this word is Poiros. I have to look this up. So let's quote this pasuk also. But essentially, Poiros is like a branch, a kind of branch, but not a twig, but like a main branch. And it's a pasuk which indicates that Parah himself supports the Eden that they leave Mitzrayim. So the Hainu, this is Shigam Parah Oza the Yitzim Mitzrayim. Parah himself supports and helps the Eden that they leave Mitzrayim. So this is the ultimate bitter of Parah. Moshe Kosov, as the pasuk says, Gam Ata Titim B'Yadenu. Moshe tells Parah, not only will you let us go, but you will give us stuff with which to serve Hashem. Animals, yeah. This causes the ultimate greatest elevation. This is what it says in Galus with regard to the Galus Mitzrayim. I think that's pronounced that. That I've implanted them in the ground. Meaning the Yidden were implanted into the space of Mitzrayim. As the Gemara says, does a person only sows a certain measure of seed, not so they can reap the same amount, but it could reap much more. Otherwise, why would you sow? Why would you plant? You're only planting seeds because you want to reap much more. So the Yidden being planted in Mitzrayim is so that there's an outgrowth that's much greater. And this is the literal birur of Mitzrayim. Behind this is the Seish the parai, the letters, which are the nitzutzos of parai. So not just the words of parai, as the Maggid seems to say that this whole deal is limited to. It's limited to parai, devoted batelim, and it's becoming part of Torah. But they're saying these letters are not just mamish pasha, the letters he speaks, but the letters themselves are like the nitzutzos, the energy that surrounds Mitzrayim. Because as the pasuk goes on to describe, literal events that happened in Mitzrayim that was meant to literally elevate the literal Mitzrayim. So not just the words of Mitzrayim, but the very space of Mitzrayim itself is elevated in this story. So the also the energy, the nitzutzos, the sparks that exist in the world of Parai become the Eibishter's energy, becomes Hashem's signs, she calls our days, and this all happens because it's first written into Torah. So he's combining with the Maggid's explanation with what we normally know about Galus Mitzrayim. We learn about Galus Mitzrayim. He went down to be Milo Nitzotzis, and all of the Makkos were all about being Milo Nitzotzis. It's what we usually learn about Mitzrayim. Comes the Maggid and says, "Well, we're just talking about Parai's words because we have to incorporate those words into Torah to elevate these Tvarim B'Telim." Says they're going to combine the two. The literal birur that we learn about always is done because the words are in Torah. This is what there was adding to the Maggid. Yeah, we're clear. So now we have the answer to the solution of how is it that we're expecting of a Yid to go face all this kind of ugliness. We're asking Hashem not to take us to any nisyonis. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself is afraid. So why are we being told to go and elevate such places that we don't belong in? Now we have the answer because the chatzchila, the birur happens in Torah. This is based on the Rebbe's Chiddush to take the Maggid's Vart and extend it to the literal birur. The literal birur that happens in Mitzrayim with the Makkos and everything begins because it's incorporated into Torah. So that explains based on this we can explain even though a Yid davens every day, please Hashem, don't test me. So that means we're being told that Hashem is granting us this request that we should not be dragged into spaces of negativity. Unless each Navi can be expected, and every Yid can be involved in Lamata Mata and Tachlis, to being revealing the Eibishter in the lowest of spaces. How so? Because the intention in our demand that a Yid elevate even the lowest places, a Yid is not expected to chas v'shalom walk into a place that's awesome, but he's expected to learn about the place that's awesome. And when he learns about the place that's awesome, he's mile the space that's awesome. And that's how he's mahapich.
So that's why they don't want to go out and do Mitzrayim. They just want to learn. They have it right in. That's their answer. Learn. And
okay, let's see. Let's finish the Maimon first.
Get this whole thing with the
let's first
before about Mari. That's funny.
Let's first finish the Maimon. We'll see. But I at this point, they were saying that a Yid is not expected to go to places that are awesome. Let's remember the birur he talked about earlier. He used the Gemara's language as "Donis das like Zachis." So he's saying that every Yid has to do his other, so that he can make him to Zachis.
If you did it,
that's right. But we're being expected to go be Mavar, even the lowest place. So what are we supposed to do? Go do it.
Answer.
He says learning. So it doesn't mean not to do Mitzrayim because there's always nothing in Mitzrayim.
The whole thing is we'll learn Torah. That's all. You do Torah, you're doing it.
He was talking about learning stories like he said earlier about the bedspread that she prepared for before she was converted and after she was converted. Those kinds of stories. He doesn't belong in those places. But he learns those stories. He's elevating those places. That's what he's saying. Which I think I mentioned this when Rabbi did the recap of the Maimon up until this point. Rabbi described the oir of his talak, you call it the that the oir that the Yid elicits through the avodah of his hapcha is an oifen of remus, but a remus that is poil. And that's what Rabbi described it. And it seems like it's connected to this idea The Yid is staying b'reimus. He's not going to places that are awesome. But it's a kind of reimus that's poil. Because he's learning. He's not just staying away and ignoring it. He's staying away, but he's learning about it. That's a reimus, but it's a reimus that's poil. Stam. The thought. And this is a similar kind of thing that we find with respect to Avodah Zarah. Even though the pasuk says one shouldn't turn toward idol worship. And turn toward idol worship is not just you can't go worship them, but you shouldn't even turn toward them. But also, it is forbidden to read from those. It's forbidden to read from those books. It's forbidden to read books of Avodah Zarah that describe how to serve Avodah Zarah. This causes a person to be pulled in that direction. So even though we're told not to learn Sifrei Avodah Zarah, nonetheless, we're expected to learn all of Torah, especially expected to learn Rambam, which indeed includes all of Torah. The a Yid is expected to learn the laws of Avodah Zarah. In which it's discussed, this bar which read, all kinds of details about how the Avodah Zarah is learned, how the Avodah Zarah is behaved. So if you're a Rav and you have to know what the halach is, okay, mainly you have to learn the halachas. But a Yid living in Canada has to learn the halachas describing Markulis, what Avodah Zarah, Baal Pa'er, whatever these details are. Says the Rabbi, yes. So you learn Rambam and you're learning Masechet Avodah Zarah, whatever it is you're learning, and it's describing the various different details in Torah about how this Avodah Zarah happens. You're mevarer those very Avodah Zarahs. And the matter is the various details of how the Avodah Zarah is performed, because it's written in Torah, is now part of Torah. Explained elsewhere, this is opening Parsha told us. Elul told us Yaakov. Sorry, Elul told us Yitzchak. I don't know this Yitzchak, and then I to describe. But the pasuk doesn't say who the prodigy is. These are the progeny. These are the offspring of Yaakov, of Yitzchak. I'm sorry. It doesn't go on to say who they are. It just goes on to talk about his lifestyle, his life. So it's kind of funny because other places when it says El Todos, it gives a whole chronology of who was born and who died and who gave birth to who. So explains Rashi. El Todos is referring to Yaakov and Esav Amur in the Parsha. It's Yaakov and Esav who are written in the Parsha. That's what we're talking about. So it explains in other places in Leviticus that Yaakov and Esav Amur in the Parsha means that Shagam Esav Amur Parsha Chelik Matorah. The Todos of Yitzchak is not Esav who's literally out there misbehaving. It's Esav that's in the Parsha. The Esav that's part of Torah. Because the Esav that's part of Torah is Kedusha. Every word you read describing Esav in Torah is absolute Kedusha. And from Yitzchak's perspective, that's who Esav is. This high level of Kedusha that's written in Torah. Okay, so Esav went out there and misappropriated and misbehaved. But as Esav is the Parsha, it's all Kedusha. This is told the Yitzchak. This is explained elsewhere. And therefore, when a Yid learns the halachas of Avodah Zarah, this itself causes mevaklus of Avodah Zarah. This itself negates the Avodah Zarah. So, on one level, befrat specifically, which has practical ramifications. Person has to be disgusted by the Avodah Zarah, and the person has to destroy Avodah Zarah. Okay, so first of all, the learning of Torah itself is mavatal. It puts it down because you learn about how it's to be eradicated, destroyed, and to be considered disgusting, and the person fulfills that. And as a problem with Avodah Zarah, and then this causes this affects in the actual Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, she be yedid lamata mata b'yeser. So the extreme of Avodah Zarah, of Pareh, which said I made myself, this causes the eradication of Avodah Zarah by learning halachas of Avodah Zarah. So more detail on this, more biur. But the idea is more as the Torah. The Alter Rebbe explains in Torah, Shatamura Zeshi B'Golos Rishon. Golos Mitzrayim, in exchange for that which happened at the first Golos in Mitzrayim, and they worked in brick and mortar, where they literally physically worked back-breaking work. But in the Achshav nowadays, in exchange of that, the same achievements that the Yidden accomplished by actually working in difficult labor in Mitzrayim, Yid achieves through Torah. As the Zohar says, in describing the Chaymer and Levanim, brick and mortar, that Chaymer can also be translated as Da Kal V'Chaymer. This comes from the term Kal V'Chaymer, which is a principle in Torah learning. Levanim can be translated as Da Liboy Hilchasa. This is the means like the forging of halacha. So in exchange for the brick and mortar, it's the toiling and working difficulty in Torah. Like Rabbi Levi said last night, a Yid doesn't have to toil anyway. But you're going to toil this way, you're going to toil that way. So a Yid.
I suggest we finish 5 to 7, which I'm going to do with Kahal Haba, because that should be exactly 7:05.
Okay.
Not to that too fast either, so it won't be function.
Okay. So a Yid's going to have to work hard anyway. The shaila is if he's going to work hard in the brick and mortar of Mitzrayim, or is he going to work hard in Torah? So it's not just a question of, as you would understand if you just read the Zohar and the Alter alone, it's not just that you have to work hard. The question is, where are you going to work hard? Are you going to work hard in Mitzrayim, or are you going to work hard in trying to understand the piece of Gemara? But more than that, the same achievement that happens in the working hard of Mitzrayim also happens when you work hard in the learning of a piece of Gemara, which is the Gemara, and it's not just the same avodah, but the same achievement as well. So this is
needed, meaning.
Yeah, that's right. The achievement to Bivara it's required. So either you're going to work hard there, or you're going to work hard in Torah. So now that it's in Torah, you don't need to go work hard. You learn. You work. You don't have to physically work hard. You have to work hard in learning of Torah, and that accomplishes what would have been accomplished if Chas v'Shalom we were working hard in Mitzrayim. Behind this, what he's saying here, behind this means to say, if he works himself to the point that it could be considered difficult labor, real effort, the way the true Torah describes real effort, and he invests that effort in learning the Torah in such a way that he's doing the Kal V'Chomer and Hilchasa. He's really, really investing in the learning and not just learning casually, but learning with a Gia, really trying to break his mind over to understanding a piece of Gemara and a Halacha and Rambam. And it is a poilum. Not only do you have the same achievement that they did in Mitzrayim, but even more. Like which they had to achieve in their physical labor. He's a movement from this is understood. Must be covered by Klali. So now we understand why the Kabbalah and Siddhas have to get into the details of a Klippa. Because it isn't enough, just generally speaking, I learned about these things. The Avodah has to be that a person invests himself into the details. As it is when you're trying to clarify a halacha. You can't give a halacha and say, well, generally speaking, this is how you do the mitzvah. That's not halacha. Halacha has to get into the details. You put it on this way, you wear it that way, you cut it this way, and so on and so forth. So that is the bidur that happens in the learning. A person works very difficultly to get into the details to the point that he works in his learning to achieve halacha. And this is promotion b'cholos avodas Adam. This parallels the way it is in general in the process of avodas Hashem. That avodas Hashem in general has to be done in such a way that we're brought into the details. As the Mitzvah explains in the Sefer Shari. Where there the Mitzvah explains, but today in order for a person to properly serve the Eibishter, must be avoid his bodiness, but from Klali, it's not just enough that generally speaking, I thought about Hashem. Some is burden in the Lakos. Generally speaking, Hashem is amazing. A person has to get to know the Eibishter and know him from the lashon of connection. To know and connect to Hashem, where a person knows all the details of all the sfiras and all seder shtashlos, which came through a very specific manner. The point actually that the Mittler was trying to say there is that if you want to have any effect on the heart, it has to be a thoughtful, detailed process. You cannot say, think for 5 minutes or whatever, Hashem loves me. How much more is there to think about that sentence? And then expect for you to fall back in love with Eibishter. It's not the way it works. You have to get into the details of what it means Hashem loves you and where it comes from and which sphere it is and how it's nimshach and how it's all the various different details that the Alter does with great length of time and Bob and Zion, who talks about the king coming down to the lowest places. Doesn't just describe it generally speaking. Hashem came down to get him because he loves you. Finished. No, it's a whole 3 pages to talk about how Hashem comes down and what it means Hashem comes down and you're in the pile of garbage and what that garbage looks like and what it means that Hashem is. And that's the whole Perek Memches, by the way, who describes the great Gilui of the Eibishter and how the Eibishter has mitzantzim and the details of the Eibishter Simsim so it can come down and reach you because he loves you. And only when a person goes through all those details and really thinks about all these details, then he can have a response back. This is what the Mittler Rebbe says. And this is a klal in Chassidus. The Frierdiker was telling a lot about this, about the prati haizbonus. Frierdiker sometimes himself goes through the exercise and says, do you see the branch outside? Think of where the branch came from. The branch came from a seed. How did the seed get there? And then from there, he takes you on a whole journey, taking you from the branch to Yesh Ma'ayin of the Eibishter. Because it has to be Bepratius. Otherwise, it remains disconnected from me. Now, Alderaz and Mavur Kutas Havayda, and a very similar thing is said in Kutas Havayda. In fact, I looked it up, and over there in Kutas Havayda, he actually says, K'mosh Mavur B'Shar Yichud, as explained in Shar Yichud. Go look there. So in Kutas Havayda, L'chakamor, Nishma Seid, and Derev Nishma Seid, and Derev Shab says a similar thing in Havayda, in Kutas Havayda. But over there, when you read the Rebbe's description of the Rebbe Marak, of the Rebbe Shab, and you look at the Rebbe Shab, it's not as apparent to see what the Rebbe is trying to say and what the Rebbe is referring to. But let's just read the Rebbe's words and translate and I'll explain what I mean. Beyond the generally speaking. There's a Kabbalah soul to serve the Eibishter, which is the foundation of serving Hashem. The Kabbalah soil has to be brought into the details, brought into all the various different details. Okay, so if you read this, you would think that in the same way there's this bonus from Klali, but that's not effective. You have to have this bonus but Proteus, and that's effective. The Rebbe Rashab says there's Kabbalah soil, or I'm going to serve Hashem from Klali, and it's got to get the Proteus, where I'm going to serve Hashem in this place, and I'm going to serve Hashem here, and I serve Hashem here. That's what you would think if you just read this line. But I looked it up, and it doesn't really say that. What it says there is, he describes it what the Mittler Rebbe said from Shar Yichud. It says, look up the Shar Yichud. And then he says, what's holding a person back from doing this bonus by from Prati is lack of Kabbalah soil. Because it's too difficult. I got the point. I have to make myself crazy to go into these Pratim. I get it. Maybe she loves me. I got it. I have to now go into the Pratim of how and what and where. It's an oil. It's a burden that I feel like is too much. And it causes a kaltkite. He uses that word. It's kaltkite, and therefore says the Rebbe Shab that you have to have Kabbalah's oil and push forward past that cold apathy, which says I get the point, and say no, go back to the point and think about every detail. The Kabbalah's oil that Rebbe Shab is talking about is actually in this very bonus. So it's benoisif into what the Shar Yichud said, not in a different arena. In the same arena that the Shar Yichud said in the Pratim, says that Rabbi Shab, you need Kabbalah soil to go there. Not just, okay, generally speaking, I serve Hashem, so I know Hashem loves me, fine. No. Push forward and think Bizbonless Pratius, the Kabbalah soil.
Also, to not be lazy.
Not to be lazy and say, I got the point. No, think and push through the thinking to get to the details. That's what Rabbi Shab says there. And it's massive to the point that we're trying to make here, which is that in the same way Avodah has to be Pratius, so too the learning of Torah describing Klippa, which is being mevarer of the Klippa, also has to be both from Prati. That's where he concludes this paragraph. Now, this is the reason why the Kabbalah, which is the first question, why Kabbalah, Chachmas Emes, which is all about the Chachma of Emes meaning the Chachma of Eibishter. It's not Eitz Hadas Tayvaraz we learned in the previous Maimer, that's in Slavish B'Doram Gashmim. It's Eitz HaChayim. It's all in the world of Holocaust. But nonetheless, in his Bara it was explained, Pratim Binyonim Glumazeh. extreme nuanced details about what klipa looks like. The citations in the places where it's explained in Kabbalah. Now we have the answer. The same way, the avodah has to be away from prati, so to the bitter has to be away from prati. Being mevader. Klipa, which comes which comes through learning these things, but it has to be in such a way to really push through and get to all the details of what is going on in the world, but not by going to the world, but by staying in Torah. Okay, so tomorrow we have 2 more, so we'll be able to finish this tomorrow. Okay, we'll be able to finish the Maamer. There's another level of the Maamer, which it seems like it's another nuance, and I think in what we're going to learn tomorrow, there's the link to what we learned in Tovshel Gimel, and I hope to be able to share that with you tomorrow by Hashem. A wonderful day.
Yeah,